Ever pause to really think about why you find certain things beautiful? Or maybe how that whole idea has been constantly reshaped through history, almost like it changes its clothes with the times. Well, today we're taking a deep dive into exactly that, the fascinating, sometimes complicated, and uh, always evolving world of aesthetics. We're basically using Umberto Eco's amazing book, History of Beauty, as our main guide. It's just this incredible tapestry pulling from art, philosophy, even everyday life, a great shortcut to, centuries of thinking.
It really is a remarkable journey because you quickly see that beauty. It's hardly ever a fixed thing. Instead, it's dynamic. It reflects culture, belief, science, even technology. This deep dive, I think, will challenge you to look past your own ideas of what's pleasing to the eye.
Right. Our mission for you today is to sort of uncover how people, over thousands of years, have defined and then redefined what is, quoting here, pleasing to contemplate independently of the desire we may feel for them. By the end, you'll discover that what we even call art or beauty, well, it's way more fluid, more tied to human experience than you might imagine. Okay, so let's unpack this big journey, starting way back with ancient Greece. Now, you might immediately picture those classic, perfect marble statues, right? But the early Greek ideas about beauty were actually, well, pretty diverse, deeply woven into how they saw the world.
That's exactly it. Initially, beauty wasn't really seen as its own separate philosophical thing. I mean, you get verses from Hesiod saying things like, only that which is beautiful is love, that which is not beautiful is not love. Sort of common sense, right? But it didn't really crystallize into a proper theory until around Pericles' time. That's when thinkers really started to, pick it apart.
And even then, it meant different things at different places. Like you'd hear about the harmony of the cosmos in hymns, enchantment in poetry, measure and symmetry for sculptors, and right rhythm in speeches is kind of everywhere, but specific.
And what's really fascinating here is Pythagoras and his school. They somehow managed to link cosmology, math, science, and aesthetics all together. For them, the universe ran on numbers. They believed all things that are known have a number. Without number, it would not be possible to know or think anything whatsoever. So beauty naturally was tied to proportion, harmony. Not just visually, but in sound, too. They found it in the math behind music, the octave, the fourth, the fifth. They even thought music could affect your psychology, like help a drunk teenager chill out. It was this whole system.
Wow. That whole numerical view really sets the stage for someone like Plato, doesn't it? In his Timaeus, he talks about the world being framed like the fairest and most perfect of intelligible beings through proportion. He even went further, saying true beauty was geometric forms, this divine beauty, pure and clear, seen with the mind, not the eyes. And he famously thought physical art, painting, sculptures, was just a false copy, could even be morally harmful because it distracted from the real abstract thing.
Which raises a really important question, right? If Plato, this huge influence, thought physical art was, well, less than ideal,
Yeah.
how did Greek artists still create such iconic, lasting works? Well, the sources show figures like Socrates, who was apparently notoriously ugly himself, but shown with inner beauty actually talking with artists. He discussed how a painter, Parrhasius, could create an ideal beauty by taking the best bits, the most beautiful traits, from lots of different models, sort of building the perfect form.
Like a composite. Makes sense. And with the sculptor Clayton, Socrates talked about how showing the body accurately in different poses could make statues seem alive.
Exactly.
Even show the workings of the soul. So it wasn't just the outside, it was about expressing something inner.
Precisely. And this points to this ongoing tension, really, between chasing an ideal living beauty of the body, using a canon, a strict rule or set of proportions, like you see with Phidias or Praxiteles, and the practical side of how people actually see the art. Plato himself noted in the Sophists that sculptors sometimes had to give up the truth and just make proportions that looked beautiful from where the viewer stood. Vitruvius later called that eurythmy, basically tweaking proportions for how our eyes perceive them, not just pure math.
So it wasn't just about the cold, hard numbers. It was also about perception, how things look to you. That sounds like the very start of a debate that's probably still going on in aesthetics. Okay, moving on from that Greek precision, the Middle Ages. Wow, that brought a really significant shift, especially with Christian thought taking center stage. The focus really moved, didn't it, from earthly perfection to more spiritual ideals.
Absolutely. I mean, the Pythagorean ideas about proportion, they were still around, they got passed down, but often they were reapplied to moral beauty. You get concepts like homo quadratus, like the square man, symbolizing, moral steadfastness, not a perfect body. There was this really profound devaluation of corporeality, the physical body, in favor of spiritual beauty. The soul was what mattered.
So less focus on the perfect physique, more on the inner state, the soul.
Exactly. Medieval art, as the sources show so well, tended towards stylized and idealized figures. The goal wasn't really realism. It was about conveying spiritual purity, inspiring devotion, getting those moral messages across. Think of those elongated figures and icons or the serene faces.
And this is where it gets really interesting, I think. This idea of claritas, clarity, luminosity, light becoming a key part of beauty. Thomas Aquinas really spelled this out.
And that idea connects deeply to seeing God as light, which you find in so many cultures. It filtered into Christianity through Plato and the Neoplatonists. Plotinus, for instance, he wondered why simple colors or the stars at night felt beautiful even without perfect symmetry. His answer was pretty profound. The beauty comes from a kind of form dominating matter's darkness, an incorporeal light, which is basically reason or idea. It's not just surface shine, it's deeper.
Wow. So light wasn't just pretty, it was literally seen as divine, a sign of God's presence. And in day-to-day life, this love of splendor showed up as, well, showing off your wealth, big time.
Oh, definitely. Medieval nobles used gold, jewels, even quite hard stones like agate or onyx, and those incredibly expensive dyes like purple, all to manifest their power. These things were objects of desire and marvel, meant to impress. And the poor, they wore drab, undyed clothes. The contrast was stark.
And the most absolutely breathtaking example of this whole aesthetic light color claritas in action has to be the Gothic cathedrals, right? Those soaring spires, the stained glass.
Without a doubt. Gothic cathedrals, especially like Archbishop Sugar, described for Saint-Denis, were deliberately designed to be just swept by blades of light filtered through that amazing stained glass. It created this powerful, almost overwhelming spectacle. It really entranced medieval men and women, turning light itself into this mystical, spiritual experience. It was immersive.
But what about the flip side? The ugly, the grotesque, maybe even the monstrous. The sources talk about this medieval fascination with grotesque, monstrous, or downright disgusting things. You see them carved on churches, right? Those weird beasts on Romanesque columns.
That is a fascinating question. Did they actually think those monsters were beautiful? The text suggests they were more fascinated by the marvelous, which is kind of a precursor to our idea of the exotic. Even if they were morally dodgy, like St. Bernard pointed out, people clearly took pleasure in contemplating them. Maybe it was the skill or the symbolism or just the sheer strangeness, a different kind of aesthetic pull.
So, not beauty in the classic sense, but maybe a thrill, a sense of wonder, or symbolism, like a visual warning. Marco Polo thinking a rhino was a unicorn that's kind of seeing the marvelous even when it isn't quite there, isn't it? Shaping reality through expectation. This medieval openness to the marvelous really shows how far things had shifted from those strict Greek ideals. Okay, so moving into the Renaissance, we see this huge cultural shift again, a real renewed focus on the human form, human potential, a definite turn away from some of those medieval spiritual priorities.
Yes, the Renaissance was this powerful revival of classical ideas, but totally infused with a new humanism. Artists like Leonardo, Michelangelo, Raphael, they weren't just aiming for classical proportion. They wanted to capture intrinsic beauty and personality. Think of Leonardo's Mona Lisa. It's got this amazing realism, fine detail, that soft light and shadow. But it feels like you're looking into a real person. And his Vitruvian Man, that's all about anatomical precision and proportion. Man as the measure of all things, literally drawn out.
Right. So it's back to proportion and order, but with this new depth, this focus on the individual, almost a scientific curiosity. But then as the Renaissance matures, things start to get, well, a bit weird, a bit unsettling. Well, that grand theory of beauty based on proportion hits its peak. You get these centrifugal forces pushing things outwards towards something more nebulous and surprising.
That's the smooth slide from the high Renaissance manner or style into what we call mannerism. Even artists like Raphael, late in his life, were already bending the rules a bit, showing violations of the canonical rules. But the Mannerists, they often found that perfect classical beauty a bit, well, empty, soulless. They actively started to dissolve its rules, looking for something more intense, more expressive.
And what's really striking here is how the Mannerists sort of spiritualized beauty, But in a totally different way from the Middle Ages, they went into the fantastic, the dreamlike, even surreal spaces, like Arcimboldo, those incredible portraits made of fruit and vegetables. They delight and amuse, showing that, hey, even a carrot can be beautiful if you look at it differently. It's about wit, intellectual play.
And that artistic shift really challenged the whole idea of objective beauty, didn't it? Those careful calculations and measurements from the Renaissance, they became just mere instruments to create clever illusions, weird perspectives, anamorphoses where the image only works from one angle. It became less about objective truth, more about showing off, leading to these fuzzy, subjective criteria of judgment, cleverness over correctness, maybe.
And that subjective turn really paved the way for the Baroque era, didn't it? Where intellectual wit, agudeza, concertismo, wit, was all about precise, fancy, and surprising effect. Ingenious invention, amazing technical skill became the measures of beauty, admired for the cleverness, the form, not necessarily the function. The unexpected, the dramatic, the theatrical was king.
And connecting this to the bigger picture, you also see this really dramatic emergence of the Sublime in the 18th century, a powerful sort of counterpoint to traditional harmonious beauty that had been kind of bubbling under.
Right, the sublime, that feeling of awe, maybe wonder, even a bit of terror when you're faced with something huge or powerful, like a stormy sea or massive mountains or a thunderstorm.
Exactly. Before, people might appreciate a painting of a storm for the artist's skill, but they wouldn't have called the storm itself beautiful. Think Aristotle on tragedy. It was about the art, the catharsis. But by the 18th century, you have travelers like Thomas Burnet feeling something august and stately in mountains, something that inspires the mind with great thoughts and passions, lifting the soul. Nature's raw power became aesthetically valuable in itself.
So nature wasn't just pretty and harmonious. It could be sublime in its sheer overwhelming power. Edmund Burke, in his philosophical inquiry, even listed qualities for the sublime: vastness, ruggedness, darkness, things that evoke terror, things that were the opposite of traditional beauty qualities like smoothness or smallness. He really separated them out.
And then Kant came along and really formalized this distinction, made it central to modern aesthetics. For Kant, beauty gives disinterested pleasure. You just enjoy it for what it is, you don't want to own it. It feels universal, even without a clear rule or concept. It has regularity without law, like a flower's perfect form. The sublime, though, that often comes from seeing nature's infinite power. It might make us feel small at first, humiliate our senses, but then, Kant says, it compensates us with this powerful feeling of our own moral greatness, our ability to even grasp such huge ideas.
Wow. Okay. So the 19th and 20th centuries, just an absolute whirlwind, right? Technology, society, politics changing so fast. And the idea of beauty got completely swept up in it all. Industrialization, revolutions in art.
It truly was a time of significant transformations. You go really quickly from the Enlightenment focus on, clarity, rationality, elegance, simplicity, straight into Romanticism's embrace of the chaotic and the grand. The Romantics loved intense emotion, the wildness of nature, individual expression, a huge contrast to the order of the previous era.
Take the Victorian era. They developed this very solid Victorian beauty, didn't they? Rooted in practicality, solidity, durability, reflecting those middle-class values. But it often had these stark contradictions, too, like really strict morality at home, but maybe less so out in the world. Hypocrisy, basically.
Indeed. And meanwhile, you had these new materials popping up: iron, glass. Initially, a lot of people resisted them, saw them as just functional, not beautiful, but eventually they forged this new beauty, challenging those traditional Victorian forms. I mean, think about the Crystal Palace, this enormous structure of iron and glass, utterly revolutionary, kind of breathtaking, a new industrial aesthetic.
Then Art Nouveau bursts onto the scene, right around the turn of the century. All those sinuous and flowing lines, often inspired by plants and nature. It wrapped itself around everything, objects, buildings, even the human body, especially the female body, in these soft lines and asymmetrical curves. It felt like a narcissistic beauty, quite sensual. And the sources link it to this idea of an erotically emancipated woman, rejecting corsets, embracing cosmetics, taking charge of her image.
And that style then morphs into Art Deco, particularly after about 1910. Art Deco goes for abstraction, geometric shapes, formal simplification. It moves towards a much more marked functionalism, trying to find this reconciliation of art and industry. Think sleek skyscrapers, streamlined trains and cars, celebrating the machine age, but with style.
And here's a really provocative moment. Early 20th century, the futurists, like Marinetti, just boldly declared that a racing car was more beautiful than the Nike of Samothrace.
Yeah.
That wasn't just talk. It really signals the definitive heyday of industrial aesthetics. The mantra becomes Form follows function. Speed, power, efficiency. That's the new beauty.
But it wasn't like everyone just accepted this overnight. There was this constant back and forth, this struggle between design and styling. Roland Barthes wrote brilliantly about the Citroën DS car, how the public saw it as a goddess déesse. Machines could be functional, yes, but also deeply beautiful, maybe even unsettling. Diabolical creations, some thought, changing life in profound ways.
And then the avant-garde movements, like dandyism, push things even further, with what you could call the beauty of provocation. Marcel Duchamp's ready-mades, a bicycle wheel, a urinal he called fountain. These were this ferociously ironic critique. He took ordinary objects, defunctionalized them, and just declared them art. The concept became the art, not the object itself.
And that just fundamentally blows up our assumptions about art and beauty, doesn't it? If beauty in objects was getting tied up with commerce and mass production, then Duchamp basically said, okay, then any common object pulled out of context can be art. It radically opened up what an art object could even be.
Then pop art comes along. Warhol, Lichtenstein, Segal. They fully embraced this mass-produced beauty. They showed that anything Marilyn Monroe's face copied over and over, a soup can, even just the yellow banana on an album cover, could become beautiful or lose its beauty just based on social context and how it was presented. It really felt like the artist was losing that traditional monopoly on creating images and deciding what they mean.
Absolutely. And that shift, in turn, led to this profound reassessment of material itself in more contemporary art, moving way beyond paint and canvas. Artists might let materials just speak for themselves, maybe through a random or unexpected laceration. Or they might find unexpected formal aspects deep within the material. It leads towards things like new aesthetics of fractals, finding complex beauty in irregular patterns, the kind you see in nature or generate with math.
Okay, wow, so we've gone from Greek numbers through divine light, industrial machines, and provocative urinals. What does this incredibly long, winding history tell us about beauty today?
Well, I think the contemporary era is definitely marked by just an unprecedented diversification and fragmentation. That's the key thing. We've moved so far beyond any single rigid, objective idea of beauty. It's much more pluralistic now, very personal and constantly evolving. There's no one definition that fits all.
And this ongoing evolution feels especially important when we think about the voices and perspectives that were, let's face it, mostly left out of the conversation for so much of this history.
That's a really crucial point to reflect on. The sources we've looked at, even Eco's comprehensive work, they do highlight how much of this big philosophical discussion on beauty was dominated by, well, white European males with their own biases, their heteronormative approaches. Women, for example, were so often just pushed into the role of muses or criticized for being too sentimental, having excess sensibility. They weren't really seen as creators or thinkers about beauty in the same way.
Yeah, even in a major work like Eco's, the text itself points out it's kind of an aberration, that women are largely absent from these philosophical debates. And while Eco does talk about fashion and mass media creating beauty ideals, it's noted he doesn't fully dig into how that often objectifies women and privileges the male gaze.
And this is a vital, ongoing critique in aesthetics today. We can absolutely acknowledge the brilliant, inspiring ideas from history, but we also have to be critical of the shortcomings, the blind spots, the biases. The time really feels right to integrate a gender perspective much more deeply, and for female artists to claim and redefine beauty in all sorts of ways, whether that's by showing the real, sweaty, bloody female body against those old ideals, or by celebrating craft and minor arts, things often dismissed in the past as valid ways to find aesthetic joy and meaning, bringing new values into the picture.
So after all this, what stands out most to you about this incredible journey? Is it that deep down humans always want something pleasing? Or is it the totally radical, unexpected ways we keep defining and challenging what pleasing even means, century after century? We have certainly covered a lot of ground today, haven't we? It's quite a trip. From Pythagoras' math harmony to Duchamp's provocative ready-mades, from the divine light in Gothic cathedrals all the way to the critical, questioning lens of contemporary aesthetics, the definition of beauty has just kept transforming, surprising us constantly.
What's truly fascinating, I think, is how beauty, despite all the shifts, the contradictions, it always seems to reflect the culture, the philosophy, even the economy of its time. It's never just about the object in isolation, is it? It's also about who's looking, the specific historical moment, the social context, and often, the power dynamics tangled up in who gets to decide what's beautiful.
It really makes you think about our own time, doesn't it? If beauty is constantly being redefined, shaped so much by fashion and the zeitgeist, the spirit of the age, then what are the ideals of beauty, maybe fleeting, maybe lasting, that we are creating and consuming right now? What will people look back and say about our aesthetic choices?
And thinking back to Carl Rosenkranz suggesting that ugliness exists only because of beauty, how do our modern fascinations with the grotesque, monstrous, or downright disgusting, you see it in horror movies, weird social media trends, some avant-garde art, how does that keep pushing the boundaries? Redefining and expanding what we find aesthetically compelling. Maybe even what counts as art, or yes, even beauty itself.
Definitely something for you to chew on long after this deep dive is over. What's next for beauty in our super fast changing world? And how will you, with your own unique viewpoint and tastes, play a part in its never-ending story?